What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel, the site editor over at Dailyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV, and as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So, what a week it has been for the Green Bay Packers and, of course, their fans. I've been doing my best to stay on top of everything over at Dairyland Express specifically. Also, again, have those articles out at Cheesehead TV. So head to those sites, check out my work to get my thoughts on really everything that's taken place so far. As I've said, I've done my best to keep up with each of those breaking news or reports, rumors, anything and everything that's happened this week. But for today's video, we're going to focus on Davante Adams, of course, and an article that I posted at Dairyland Express on Friday. My four big things from the Green Bay Packers trading Davante Adams. Now, if you follow along or have tuned in before, after each Packers game during the regular season, I have my 3 or 4 big things from their performance. So I decided to take that idea and apply it to this Davante Adams situation and the trade. So let's just dive right in. So big thing number one, and it's an obvious one, wide receiver went from a big need to a massive need. Even with Davante Adams on the roster, wide receiver needed to be addressed this offseason. If it wasn't going to be in free agency, it needed to be in the draft, and it needed to be somewhat early on. But obviously, without Davante Adams, that need has grown exponentially. Currently under contract for 2022 is Al Mazard, Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers, Rico Gafford, Juwan Winfrey, and Chris Blair. And of course, our focus is on 2022. But as we look ahead to 2023, even of those receivers, the only player under contract 2023 and beyond right now is Amari Rodgers. So wide receiver is a massive need. There are a few free agent options still out there, some big names as well: Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry, Will Fuller, among others. And I do think that there's a ton of value in Green Bay bringing in a veteran free agent to this offense. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be Julio Jones or someone of that stature, but I think having that veteran presence, someone who's been around, can get acclimated quickly, can hopefully develop a quick rapport with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's a lot of value with that. And then you take your swing at bringing in perhaps more the higher upside individual or individuals via the draft. And as those rookies get acclimated, come along, get used to the offense, get their rhythm, timing, everything that goes into the passing game with Aaron Rodgers, you at least have a veteran presence along with Lazard. You still have Randall Cobb to lean on while those rookies develop. We've seen the last couple of years Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase come in right away and make huge impacts. Obviously, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen, but having that veteran presence is at least going to provide Green Bay with a buffer where you don't necessarily have to lean on a rookie to be the guy day one. Hopefully, as the season progresses, they become that guy. But I think there's a lot of value in adding a veteran presence and not just looking towards the draft. Now, one name to keep our eyes on, I wrote about this at Dairyland Express as well, is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I know he's not, Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry, but there's a lot of reasons why a reunion with MVS makes sense. For one, he adds that element that is not on the roster right now. There's no one on this roster that has 4.37 speed that can take the top off the opposing defense. As we've talked about here before, I know I've written about it quite a bit. That's an important element that this offense was missing. When MVS was sidelined last season, it's not a coincidence that Green Bay, in terms of big play ability, they took a hit. They finished second in 2020. They were still productive in that regard in 20, finishing 10th, but their big play rate, according to Sharp Football, took a fairly significant hit. And a large part of that was because MVS was sidelined. Now, that's the obvious, but having that speed on the field also draws the attention to safeties, which creates better spacing, which can open up the passing game for others. The 49ers game, the one Green Bay lost in the playoff, is a prime example of what not having that element can do for the offense. 49ers weren't really scared of Green Bay beating them over the top. Everyone was closer to the line of scrimmage. Things were condensed. Moving the ball through the air was that much more difficult. So whether it's MVS, whether it's a draft pick, the Green Bay Packers need to add that element to their offense for 2022. So that's one reason why that makes, a reunion with him, bringing him back, makes so much sense. On top of that, he knows the offense. He has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers spoke very, very highly of him this past season. Also, MVS has done a good job of developing his game. He's become more impactful on those short routes, intermediate routes. It was a very small sample size, but he was one of the most efficient slot receivers in terms of yards per route run last year. Again, very small sample size, but worth noting. So, all those factors boiled together, it makes sense to bring him back. Now, that doesn't mean he's coming back to replace Davante Adams. What they are asked to do, what their skill sets are, completely different. That doesn't mean that he's going to be the guy in 2022. Again, different jobs, different tasks that they have. But in terms of building the depth of the receiver position, which I know we're looking at star power, but depth is still a need as well. And again, they don't have that deep element. That's where the value is for Green Bay. Now, cost is going to be obviously an important factor in this. Tom Silverstein of Packers News would report that MVS is looking in the range of just a 1-year deal, $7 to $10 million per year. If Green Bay adds, say they sign him to $7 million for 1 year, if Green Bay adds voided years to that deal, which they've done the last 2 years to a number of contracts, they can get that cap hit down to maybe $2, $3, $4 million here in 2022, which is very manageable, especially considering they have that added cap space opened up now, which we'll talk about here shortly. So MVS, I think, is a name to certainly watch. I know might not be as exciting. It's not new compared to Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, Will Fuller, but for the reasons discussed, it does make a lot of sense. But regardless of who it is, or maybe it's one receiver, two receivers, Packers, I think there's a lot of value in adding that veteran presence, as we had already discussed. But again, it's going to have to be a top need in the draft, and certainly feels like this is the year that they're going to take a receiver in the first round, doesn't it? So next up, big thing number 2 from Davante being traded. Apparently the salary cap wasn't the issue. So going back to last summer, we knew that Green Bay and Adams, they were fairly far off in negotiations. Adams was looking at DeAndre Hopkins' 2-year extension with Arizona. I believe it was around $27.2 million per year as the benchmark for top receiver money. And the Green Bay Packers, I have a whole video devoted to this back in, I think, November. So go find that if you want greater detail. But the Packers were looking at Julio Jones' 3-year extension back when he was with Atlanta, which was around $22 million per year as the benchmark for highest paid receiver in football. So that chasm between who is the top receiver in football, what that money looks like, all along, I believe, was the biggest, cause of issues in the negotiation process. Now we get to, let me take a step back here. So when the news comes out that Adams traded, my initial thought is they just were never going to be able to close that gap in negotiations, or maybe the salary cap. The Packers, as we know, are cap strapped. They're doing a lot of penny pinching maneuvers just to get under this year. Things are going to be tight again next year, year after that. So maybe just the salary cap and not being able to offer Adams what he wanted was the reason that they were going to move on from him and trade him. But we'd later learn from Rob Demovsky of ESPN that the Packers had actually offered what the Raiders did to Adams. Adams turned it down and wanted to go play with Derek Carr. And the Raiders are his hometown team growing up in Northern California as well. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. I did not expect that added wrinkle to it where the Green Bay Packers matched the offer and Adams still said, I don't want to be here anymore. My guess on why that's the case is because again, just speculation, but it sounds like the Packers offer was once the Raiders offer was out or very close to it. And Adams is probably sitting here going, we've had the last year or so to try to hammer this out. There hasn't been much movement, at least based on the reports, on the Packers side of things to help close that gap. And now you're trying to match the offer. It sounds like the damage had been done at that point. Bridges had been burned to a certain degree, and Adams had made up his mind that he didn't want to play in Green Bay anymore. Another important aspect to this is the guaranteed money. That's always been an important factor as well. We focus in on how much a player makes per year, but in terms of real money, what's the guaranteed money? The Packers typically in their contract structures aren't going to guarantee much beyond 2 years. So if it's a 4-year deal, odds are there's going to be a season. Aaron Nagler, Cheesehead TV, has commented on this several times that Davante was looking for a larger guarantee, so that it's beyond that 2 years. Maybe 3 years of the contract are going to be guaranteed, or at least not able, or where Green Bay's at least not able to get out of it after that second year, and giving him more stability. So that's another big factor in this as well. How much did Oakland guarantee in his deal versus how much did the Packers actually guarantee? Because that's a big difference as well. So even though they may have matched dollars per year, if the guaranteed money was different, that could have led Davante saying, no, just trade me to Las Vegas anyways. And looking back at this past year where Green Bay was, not able to or unwilling to uh, give Adams the type of contract offer that he was looking for. Last summer, that was an incredibly difficult thing to do because they didn't know what Aaron Rodgers was doing. If Aaron Rodgers was going to move on, I think we all agree that Adams was very likely to move on as well. So with the Packers not knowing what Rodgers' future was, it made it a lot more challenging on their part to try to predict or look ahead to how they're going to piece this roster together and where they're going to devote money, especially such large dollar amounts that Davante's making. So I just thought that was really, really interesting. In the end, it wasn't the money. If the Green Bay Packers, or if Davante Adams had taken that offer, he would still be in Green Bay, and the Packers would be paying him exactly, or at least in terms of dollars per year, what Oakland or Las Vegas is. So I thought that was interesting. Also important to note, Aaron Rodgers was aware of all of this going on, which we had to expect. And, him still signing the contract, knowing about Davante's uncertainty, his future with the team, shows that there is still certainly a high level of confidence that Roger has in this overall roster, which he absolutely should. There's still a lot of talent on this team. We know he's back because he wants to win a Super Bowl. And if he didn't think that was the case here in Green Bay, without Davante Adams, he wouldn't be back. Next up, the Green Bay Packers now have the ability to round out their roster. With Davante Adams no longer on the books for 2022, his $20.1 million franchise tag is no longer on the books either. So that's $20.1 million in extra spending power that the Packers have. On top of that, they gained a first and second round pick. So they have 4 picks in the top 60, 5 in the top 107 within the first 4 rounds. This is a very well put together roster, but it's a top heavy one too. Before Davante's trade, of the $208.2 million in cap space that the Green Bay Packers have, that's the league wide number, about $97 million of that was devoted to just 6 players. It's a very top heavy roster. It's still a well put together roster, but there are holes to fill. Cornerback is a need. After Jair and Eric Stokes, cornerbacks on the roster combined, they have 38 career defensive snaps. A third safety is a need. Edge rusher is a need. Interior defensive lineman. There's only 4 interior defensive linemen on the roster right now. Offensive tackle depth, of course, receiver, a pass catching tight end. All of those are needs. So the wide receiver room took a hit. The wide receiver room is not going to be as good as it was in 2021. But you hope, now that you have $20 million extra in spending power and free agency, that you have those additional draft picks and some very, very high quality ones at that you can bolster the depth at those positions need, something that you may not have been able to do before. It sounds like, based on reports, that Rasul Douglas is going to resign. Green Bay wasn't going to be able to resign Rasul Douglas if Davante Adams was still under contract. So now your cornerback room has just been elevated. If you can elevate those other positions to your defensive line, edge rusher, cornerback, tight end, you can help mitigate Davante Adams' loss. So that's how they're going to overcome this absence. It's not going to be, finding another Davante Adams. It's not going to be at the wide receiver room's going to get better or even the same. It might not even be in the same ballpark. We don't know. But by elevating those other positions, you can help absorb his absence. And again, it's still an incredibly talented football team. David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins will hopefully return at some point. You have potentially the best running back duo in football. The back-to-back MVP under center. Sean Gary and Preston Smith were 2 of the most productive edge rushers in football. All-pro Devondre Campbell. Jay Alexander's an all-pro. Second team all-pro in 2020. Eric Stokes is ascending. Adrian Amos is one of the most reliable safeties in football. They have tons and tons of talent, but now they'll be able to fill in the cracks because of that added cap space and because of those additional draft picks. Lastly, we're going to see a different version of the Green Bay Packers offense here in 2022. Now, at its core, the bones of it, it's going to be the same. It's still Matt LaFleur's system. His scheme, Aaron Rodgers is still under center, but it's not going to be. There's going to be more of the passing game being spread around. We all know that Rodgers would be focused on Davante Adams, and rightfully so. He wins just about every time he he's lined up across from someone. Rodgers even said last season, "There's no 50-50 balls when you're throwing Davante Adams. He always has the advantage." But now we're going to see Green Bay spreading the ball around more, which, again, no replacing Davante Adams. But if you're a defense and you don't know where the ball is going to go, that can certainly be challenging as well when it comes to covering. We also might see more reliance on the run game. Without Davante Adams, there's not, in terms of receiver or pass catchers, there's really no star power on this offense right now. So if you're going to lean on your star players, who is that? That's Aaron Jones and that's AJ Dillon. So we could see those two more involved in not only the passing game, but Green Bay as a whole leaning on the run game as well. On top of that, this defense, if Green Bay is able to bring back Rasul Douglas, a very, very large contingent, most of this 2021 defense is going to be back for the 2022 season. And we just saw how well they played in that playoff matchup with San Francisco. So things are going to be different, but different doesn't necessarily mean bad or worse. This offense can still certainly be effective even without Davante Adams. We'll probably see a more truer version of what Matt LaFleur's system can be with spreading the ball around. And his play design is to get players open schematically, not having to win one-on-ones, getting the ball to them in space, letting them pick up yards after the catch. Just look at like the San Francisco 49ers, a team that has knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs two of the last 3 years. It's not as if their receiving core, they have an electric player in Deebo Samuel, but as a whole, it's not as if their receiving core is this super dynamic star-powered unit. They lean on the run game. They have a good defense. We may not that we'll see Green Bay fully shift to that because, of course, they still have Aaron Rodgers under center, but we may see them swing a little in that direction when it comes to how this offense operates. And, of course, still remains to be seen how they're going to fill at the receiver position. So offense is going to be different in 2022. Again, the bones of it aren't changing, but it's going to operate differently. And different doesn't mean bad. It just means different. And also of note, before we take off here, the Packers are 7-0 under Matt LaFleur when Davante Adams has not played. So take that stat as you will. Of course, Green Bay is not better without him, but it goes to show that they can overcome his absence. So there you have it. Those are my 4 big things from the Green Bay Packers' decision to trade Davante Adams. You can find all of my work at Dairyland Express and Cheesehead TV. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Please, if you enjoyed, hit like, hit subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. So until next time, friends, as always, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.